Vajra sattva samaya manopalaya Vajra sattva tenopatishta didro me bhava Sutto kayo me bhava Suppo kayo me bhava Anurakto me bhava Sarva siddhi me prayatsam Sat karma sutsame Sitam shriyam kuruhum Ha 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 ho Bhagavan sarva tattagata Vajra mame munsa Vajra bhava maha Samaya sattva ahum pe Locho sambo pagyu trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda Pelge drolor zampe tse prache Pande lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajradara sumatimo nisha sane karm Utta varda nishri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimo nisha sane karm Utta varda nishri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum hum Om a guru vajradara sumatimo nisha sane karm Utta varda nishri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum hum Om guru vajradara sumatimo nisha sane karm Utta varda nishri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum hum Om guru vajradara sumatimo nisha sane karm Utta varda nishri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum hum Om guru vajradara sumatimo nisha Utta varda nishri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Pakyuke kudan dagi lo Pakyuke sungdan dagi nga Pakyuke tukdan dagi yi Tön yerme çıktı çingi lo Makyuke kudan dagi lo Makyuke sungdan dagi nga Makyuke tukdan dagi Tön yerme çıktı çingi Om muni muni maha muni shakya muni svoha Sashipu ki chushime to Tramare rabalingashi Nide gempadi Sange shintu Mikte ulvarki Drokun namanda shingla Chopar Shoyidam Guru Ratna Mindrala Kam Niryatayami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsochi Dagi chushe gibe sonamgi drola pinchira sange drupar sho sange chodan sogi chonam la chanchu pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi chinso gibe sonamki drola pinchira sange drupar sho sange chodan sogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sange drupar sho.
In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge in enlightenment through the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
I take refuge into enlightenment through the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo Alhaye Ke Dan Ludan Jin Ke Drubundan da Mi Ke Nam Dan Drwa Kun Ke Dranam Chi Tsampa Tamche Ke Tu Dagi Chöten. Buongiorno.
Good morning. There's a passage, if I remember well, I believe Milarepa wrote it, which means to meditate without having first listened and understood. It's like trying to climb a big mountain with your fists closed. To meditate is the process of familiarization. In order to do that, first of all, I have to get there first. I can't familiarize myself with something that's far away from me. If I just make a banal example, for example, with love, I have to generate love. Otherwise, I can't familiarize ourselves with it. In order to familiarize ourselves with any inner state, we need to generate it. So we need to listen, acquire information, reading and understand. And when we have the information, the next step is to understand that and in the process that information becomes ours. It's not simply information that somebody has imparted to us and we internalize it. But that's not enough. There's another proverb that says, I'm trying to remember everything. Something like that. You erudite Geshe, with words like flower words, doesn't bear fruit, which means meditating without having understood and listened Milarepa says in another passage, when you go into a grotto, to a cave, to meditate without having understood, and you're just doing yourself harm, because the process of meditation is the process of meditation. In order to do that, I have to come into contact with that thing. On the other hand, the other extreme, I study a lot. I become super erudite. I understand everything, but I don't meditate. The fact of having a good understanding well doesn't mean that we can transform ourselves. I can have a fantastic understanding of that which is good for me, that which harms me. Also of impermanence. It doesn't mean that I manage to live with impermanence, seeing impermanent things as impermanent. When I can understand the importance of altruism, generating love, the fact that I understand doesn't mean to say that I have attained these states of love and compassion. So then there's an Italian verb which says between thinking and doing, in the middle there's the sea, translated very roughly. So this sea in between, we can only cross with the process of familiarization, meditation. One of the biggest problems, difficulties I see in Buddhism, in this context, and also in life in general, is the fact that we have somewhere this expectation that once we have understood, we can just, that's enough. Okay, I understand I shouldn't get angry. I shouldn't. And I understand that jealousy is not good for me. But now you have to meditate on patience, on rejoicing. Understand that I'm mortal and I have to die, but you meditate on the certainty of death and the certainty of death and the uncertainty of the moment of death. So it becomes spontaneous. Therefore, the spiritual path is divided into 3 parts. Listening, which is the beginning. But this actually applies to anything. And let's make an example. A practical example. One of the first realizations in order to practice well is to realize the preciousness of life and the possibility of practicing and the certainty of war. Otherwise life just passes by and we let ourselves get overwhelmed by daily life. Today's there's something, then tomorrow's there's something else. Okay, now it's summer, we need to think about sunbathing and going on holiday. And then when after the holidays and we go back to work. And then there's always something to do, and then it's Christmas. There's always something, either a problem or because we're in love or we split up from our loved one. There's always something that consumes us. And we see this way life just passes by, one thing and another. In order to be able to get the essence, to use every day of our lives, not just as something to resolve, to live, to pass through, but to use it as an opportunity, real opportunity, to develop ourselves. In order to do this, it's necessary. We need a sense of urgency. Otherwise, if we don't give it priority, we don't put energy into it. This sense of urgency is generated by two things. The awareness, the appreciation of how amazing this opportunity we have is, and also that we don't know how long this opportunity will last. I don't want to get into details of this. The preciousness of this life, in very few words, in order to be able to transform ourselves well, there are three conditions which are necessary, which seem banal, but they're not. So we need the minimum materially, not to be caught up totally with our own survival. We have that, do we? Some less, some more. To have minimal, to have the minimal indispensable minimum, is that a kind of obvious thing now in this world or not? It doesn't mean just only having sufficient materially, but also not having to be slave only to our own survival. And sometimes we are, because we create a survival, and we insist on having luxury cars, so we become slave to that survival. But we're not really slaves to our survival. So this is a balance between inner and external conditions, but means not being totally consumed by problems of survival, maintaining ourselves in this life. And unfortunately, in this planet, we're actually the minority. The second condition is having a guide who guides us correctly. A spiritual guide. Doesn't have to be a religion. It's a path, an inner path to develop our qualities, to transform states which generate unpleasant emotions like anger, hatred, towards peace, towards and transforming them into satisfaction, into love, so we need somebody who guides us correctly. And the third condition is the desire and the courage to get out of our comfort zone and to embark on the path of transformation. These are the three conditions which permit us to grow, to develop. Remembering that we have three levels: gross, conceptual, superficial, subtle, which are those state not manifest, and the third very subtle level where we have the imprints of these. So we really need to work on the very subtle level, because however much I manage to do very good things on the other levels, but if I don't work on a level where there's some kind of continuity, we die, and that's it. That's the end of the story, like material wealth. Because however much rich I am, what happens when I die? I make a trust. I find my reincarnation, and then I give my money to the next life. I wouldn't trust that. What happens when we accumulate the lot materially, when we die? That's it, the end of the story. goes on to others. If we leave not very much, there are not too many conflicts. If we leave a lot, maybe there are a lot of conflicts. Maybe somebody will make good use of it. Maybe somebody won't. Anyway, it's not my problem at that point. The point is, I accumulate and then it all vanishes. But if we want, really, it's a process, an inner process of development which transcends death itself, and in the Buddhist path, and transcends daily life. This moment, which enables that which we transform now, helps us to have access to something in 5-10 years. It doesn't necessarily mean an immediate result now, but it means growing inside, developing our qualities, that they remain as a point of reference, as strength for the future, and also which also transcend death. So this is called the precious rebirth. This is my interpretation, personal interpretation. I don't think that that the preciousness of the human rebirth. I actually don't believe that human beings are that special. I don't believe that when you die, there's this kind of idea that when you are reborn as a human, you're already superior. A human being is simply somebody who has intellectual capacity, which has an enormous capacity. But if it's used badly, it has tremendous, devastating effects. We see that. Therefore, it becomes a precious condition when we use it. And these are the three conditions: not living for mere survival, to have a guide who corrects us correctly, because we can't go arrive somewhere where we have no idea where we're going, and to have the desire to take risk, to get out of our comfort zone and embark on the path, because it's not always pleasant growing, developing. We have to be brutally honest with ourselves, look at ourselves in the eyes. We need to generate the inner force to be able to confront all the difficulties that there will be inevitably. But it's a fantastic opportunity, because if we do it well, we can really cultivate the characteristics which can sustain well-being, a state of well-being in us, and help others to achieve this. But how long will these conditions last that we have? If things go really well, we have the certainty of this life, but thereafter we don't know. Therefore, when we develop the awareness of the preciousness of this life, together with awareness of the certainty of death and the uncertainty of the moment of death, this is the base for us to generate energy, to have the courage to get out of our comfort zone and to overcome obstacles. But it's not enough to understand this. We have to familiarize ourselves with this. And here we enter the path of meditation. What I've just described is the path of listening and the preciousness of life and impermanence. In order to arrive at certainty of this, and there's a much longer process which we should embark on, that of familiarization. It's only when we've repeated so many times and we've sat and generated the joy and the appreciation of the preciousness of this life, and what we say, wow, how amazing, I have this. I don't know why it happened to me, but it happened. When we generate spontaneousness, it means we really feel it, and we have to familiarize ourselves with this in order that it becomes spontaneous. So we do this also with the certainty of death. When we think for an instant, when we have like goosebumps and cold in the stomach, and we think of our own mortality, if we ask ourselves, will we die? What do you say? But where does the reply come from? From your tummy or from your head? Okay, I'm going to ask you, will we die or not? We need to ask ourselves so many times that it doesn't come from our head. It comes. So before answering, we breathe a bit, so that the reply doesn't come conceptually from the mind. Anyway, remember that dying is not the problem. Rather, living life and making the most of the opportunities that we have. This is an example of the importance of meditating, just sitting there, breathing well, take my mind from other thoughts. It's very nice. It's very good for you. But it also depends where I get to eventually, there's the risk of meditating. So there's a risk of meditating for a long time and familiarizing ourselves with a state of mental torpor, tiredness. Sometimes you get into this state of pleasure. I'm not awake and I'm not asleep. There's also a kind of taste in your mouth. It's all very pleasurable. You just go into that foggy state, and relaxed. It's not ugly in itself, but at the end of the day, what do I familiarize myself with? With mental torpor. Okay, in the context where most of us have too much mental agitation, this is good. But that's not the final objective of the meditation. So we need to understand it's good to study, to listen, to reflect and understand. But once we've done that, on the other side we need to familiarize ourselves with us. So that Gom in Tibetan means to familiarize. The way to do it is the way we do it is to generate the state with which we wish to familiarize ourselves with, not in a conceptual state. To generate an eternal state so we can familiarize ourselves completely. One of the difficulties that I find with meditation in this sense, which is pertinent to the times in which we live in a context where we want immediate results. We want a quick fix. We want things yesterday. Meditation. So we want to come out of meditation being half a Buddha. Do something, hey, and we get immediate results. But it doesn't work like that. Never worked like that. It's when we're in a really bad state, let's imagine on this table there's a whole load of dirt, that nasty stuff, food that hasn't been cleaned away for ages, just really dirty. It's certain point we see that it's dirty, we take away with a broom. And then the first sweep, we say, hey, we've got rid of most of the dirt, and we feel good. But if you continue to sweep, the stains that are underneath, the oil that has been there for years, in the cloth, can you do that? Can you get rid of that with a broom? No. At a certain point, we have to use elbow grease and really get into it to clean. And the more you try to clean and get rid of the dirt, the more you see the dirt. I remember when I was in India, I arrived in India, I was a kid when I cleaned, and I swept everywhere. And also on the tables, I just swept everywhere. So the sponge that we used for dishes, we also used for the floor. Oh no, the monks did this, sorry. And they said, oh, okay, it's clean. I said, well, actually, not really. Because we have two different concepts of cleanliness. And the more you clean, the more you see the dirt. We get this, no? No, I don't mean to get into kind of paranoia about cleanliness. That's another thing. I'm using this analogy because the more you clean, the more you see the dirt. So we see the mental defilements at a more subtle level, things that were there and we didn't see, because with all the dirt on top, we didn't see it. So I thought getting rid of the dirt, the superficial dirt, everything was okay. So the path is, it's described as an X, where going from one side to the other, from low. So what, from the part that goes up from the low point, that's our, so it's our effort that has to grow. And the other one downwards. So, and the other arm indicates the gross level, a continuum of the level of grossness of our mental defilements. So if you cross your arms, you can see the more gross level the mental defilements are, the less effort you need. So, and vice versa. So we can see that it's not an instantaneous thing. It's a long road. We need a lot of patience and affection for ourselves, remembering that changing habits takes a lot of time. But let's imagine a process. Physical training. Is there a difference between a very intense physical training and not doing anything for a long time, or doing it lighter regime but every day? What's the problem with doing something intensively and then abandoning it? Well, we just forget. Also because because the problem is if I do continue physical exercise and then I drop it and then I do a movement that I shouldn't, then I have problems, because we need to change our habits and create familiarity. So if I take exercise in a slow, gentle, but constant, regular way, I change my habits. And with our mind, it's exactly the same. So what happens is, Buddhist teachings, there's a part which is really important, which regards listening and understanding. and the philosophical teachings, and Lam Rim, Lojong, lots of very important parts which I personally like very much. That process of reflection, listening, but then that's okay. The part, what do I do now? Now I understand. I have to familiarize myself. I have to repeat. There are different ways of repeating. One is, so one way is analytical, or one is focusing, single-pointed meditation. So, for example, the presences of this life, and I stay there to familiarize ourselves with that. Then there's the other way, through symbology, through archetypes. Because the most direct example is Guru Yoga practice. When we have someone in front of us whom for us represents state of love, understanding, awareness, gratitude, compassion, altruism, wisdom, balance and joy, etc. And we have a deep sense of connection with that person in front of us. If we imagine to be that being, naturally, we automatically connect with everything that being represents. I don't know if that's clear. It's as if what a symbol can communicate more than 1,000 words. We connect, if we connect with a symbol, we connect with everything it represents. We can see in business that companies spend a lot of time and money, create an effort, creating a logo, because it represents a company. For example, trademarks that we know, like Coca-Cola or any other. It's interesting how the logo on its own, trademark, is actually much more valuable than all the factories and the production facilities behind it. Because when I've created that identity, because when you see it, when you hear it, you connect automatically with it. It has an enormous power. In Buddhism, one of the contexts in which this is used is in Tantra. One of specific characteristics of Tantra is called Dripulamkar, which means bring the result into the path. I want to familiarize myself with satisfaction, peace, harmony, love, and so on. What do? I connect with that which represents for me that in a very deep way. And I imagine that I am that. I embody that. So that which I wish to achieve and become that using my imagination. And what's interesting is that our mind, when we imagine something, it's as if we were living it really. If I imagine a moment of joy and love and pleasure, physically, there's all our hormones and whatever inside of us are activated as if we were living it in real time. On the other hand, when I imagine something sad or ugly from the past, what happens? My body reacts. If I imagine a danger, what happens to the body? Come on. The body says, oh, you're just imagining it. No, I don't think so. Cortisol arises. We get on the defensive, ready to fight the menace, the threat. everything. We know this. The stress that most of us live, is it mental or physical? They're mental. And if tomorrow this happens and that happens, if he doesn't do that, she doesn't do that, and tomorrow I go to work, and if I don't manage to do this, well, we have millions of mind problems. When we imagine something, we physically live as if we react as if we were living it in real time. And even there's the placebo effect. We know that. In a few words, take something, imagining that it's good for me, and really believing it, and that actually makes you feel good. Let's remember that there's the opposite, the nocebo effect. The nocebo effect is if we think something's going to be bad for us, then it does do us harm. So, as I say, it's good to be interested in eating well, but let it not become a paranoia, then it becomes a nocebo. Anyway, what happens is that our mind has a enormous power of transformation and familiarization. But it's much more effective if I use symbols rather than words. Therefore, if I want to develop satisfaction, concentration, love, compassion, generosity, humility, awareness, etc., the more rather than understanding through analysis, if we manage to connect with the symbol which communicates an inner state, that brings us automatically to that state, and we generate it internally. Let's think of an example. Let's think of a person. Think of a person who's very patient. Can we think of, all of us, think of a person who's patient? Let's imagine we're in a difficult moment, and at a certain point, let's imagine that we remember that person, that patient person, and then we dissolve into that person and feel the patience. Because if I say to myself, oh, I can't ever be that patient, but if I do a bit of role playing, if I just imagine what it's like to be that person, I automatically connect with patience, or it can be love, gratitude, or the other emotions. When we can really do it, it has a very, very, very strong power of familiarization. In Tantra, it's one of the fundamentals to bring the result into the path. The way of doing this, which have methods which have four main parts. They are preparation, preliminary practices, so effective part, practice, generation, that's divided into generation, completion, and then the conclusion. Otherwise we can divide it as preparation, practical the practice, and then conclusion. And then there are many methodologies and practices. And if we want to use that term, many archetypes as well, but they're all directed the same way. All of these mandalas that we have on the ceiling, they're like maps for meditation. The central part of the mandala represents the purity at a very subtle level. And then as we go out, we get to the most gross level. And then coming in, there's the path, indication of the path to get to the very subtle part in the middle. I can't describe all of them, but let's see. Most of the mandalas have lotus flowers around the outside, and then vajras, this gold vajra. And also, if we look at the temple, we have lotus flowers and vajras, which go right round the temple. These regard the preliminary practices. So these represents entering into the path, represents love, compassion, and wisdom. Wisdom and method. So the Vajra represents male energy, and the lotus feminine energy, which together represent method and wisdom. So that's the preparation. And then the mandala shows us the process to get to the center at a deeper level, to bring these to love and compassion. So it's a question of bringing love and compassion, these two things that we described with the doja and lotus, at a deeper and deeper level until we get right to a very profound level. Most of the mandalas, they have 4 sides plus a center. If you look at the temple, there are 4 colors. We have on the west, red, north, green, south yellow, and west blue. And then we have the center, which is white. Why are there 5 colors? Because we're made of 5 parts. They represent 5 parts of us, which are the bases, which forms our identity, which are called 5 aggregates. We're made of body and mind. So body is called the aggregate of form, and the mind is more complicated, divided into 4. With sensations, discernment, compositional factors, and the so-called consciousness, without going into details, but that's how the mind's divided up. The fact is, to get to a deeper level in the center, we need, first of all, to work on the gross level. So, working with the 5 aggregates, body and mind. And slowly, we get to the center. And if we look at the center of the temple, we have the 5 colors. So the center of the mandala, central mandala is white. White. So where the center of the column, which has 100,000 crystals more or less, which represents the more subtle, deeper part of ourselves. This shows that developing wisdom, love, and compassion will bring us slowly from a gross level down to a very deep level, to a very subtle level, as represented by the central column full of crystals. in the center of the temple. As we said at the beginning, it's not enough to remain on a conceptual level. We need to bring that from the experience from a conceptual level to a sensation, to feelings, to an imprint on a very deal, so that it stays there. And if we look at the mandala, and the mandalas represent exactly that. But all the mandalas are composed of, some have symmetries around the outside. For example, the Haruka, for example. Guya Samaja, for example. Can you see some of them? On the roof, some of the mandalas have symmetries around the outside, which represent the suffering of samsara. Before you can end into the path, you have to understand your own suffering, that which is good for you, that which is beneficial, and the desire to get out of the suffering. So we have to fall in love with inner peace and love. And all this is represented by the preliminary practices. Whatever meditation technique we use in Tantra, for example, self-healing, in the process of studying, learning, and practicing, there are 3 levels. The first and the second. The third is usually not described, but we can also describe it if we want. The first level is how to recite. So first of all, you do a practice learning to recite. You just recite. Because there are 2 moments. Buddha explains the taking refuge. Taking refuge is, the important thing is to actually say, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. What do you think? And what you think doesn't matter. To other disciples, it's an exact opposite. It's what you think is important, not the words. Seems very contradictory, no? But those... So to those who weren't able to generate, he could see who was able to generate that inner state immediately. He just told them to say it verbally. And as you repeat it, slowly, you realize it internally. So first of all, speech brings us to the process of thinking. So recitation as an instrument to generate a mental state. And another, that is combined with visualization. So a lot of practices it's taken up with recitation and self-healing. It's not only related to mantras, but also mudras and gestures. So we learn how to do the mudras correctly and to recite the mantras. And we know the meaning of mantras slowly. That's the first level. And that's already quite a lot. The second level of practice is what I visualize. Because when we visualize, we imagine has an even bigger effect on directing, a bigger power in directing our mind. And the third level, which is much deeper, which usually isn't explained, is that of the state of consciousness that I generate with the recitation of visualization. One of the reasons it's not usually described, because if you do the first 2 well, there's no need for explanation of the third. But sometimes it's useful to know where we're what our objective is, where we want to arrive, and that gives us a kind of faith in what we're doing. In the East, people don't care so much to know where they're going. If you go to a Chinese, Indian, Tibetan doctor, it doesn't tell you anything. You go there, get the treatment, take this, and because there's more faith, well, we want to know. We want the explanation, even if we don't have the expertise to be able to understand the explanation. We don't have the knowledge. So for this reason, as we're in the West, I think it's important to recite, visualize, and then have an idea of where we're going in terms of mental state. We start by reciting, and then we learn how to visualize, and in order to create the inner state of consciousness. So that's what interests us the most. It's the final destination. The practice is divided into 3 parts. Preliminaries, which are very important. It's the preparation. It's the basis which allows us to enter into the mandala, into the path. Because otherwise we just remain on a very superficial level. So, for example, when you cook, a good cook, where does the preparation start to make a dish? To find the ingredients. Buying the ingredients. For example, to me there was a Korean monk, a nun, sorry. There was a TV series, on cooking, and there was this Korean nun, and she had I invited her here, and she said she'd come. Cooking for her was, she spent a lot of time on the preparation and preparing all the ingredients. If the preparation isn't good, the dish itself is not so good. The same for, let's say we take let's say a good athlete. Even if the effective part, the important is the day of the competition, but the preparation is even more important. The preliminaries, the preparation, should not be seen as something is less important. This time, these days, and this time I want to give more emphasis to the state of generation, because in the past I've explained in great detail preliminary practices. This time I'll do it more superficially, more quickly, and we'll give more emphasis to the part of generation. And Lama Caroline will focus on the part, the completion and the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. But the important thing is, the important thing is to see in self-healing, that is to see the 3 parts: preliminary, the effective part, and the conclusion. The preliminaries was where we generate the motivation. We connect ourselves with the why we're doing this. That includes an appropriate mental state to do the practices. Otherwise, we start doing the practices. Otherwise, we use the practice itself to achieve that state. So if you don't prepare before, if you don't prepare well, it's at the end that you're in a calm mental state, which is actually the preliminary part. You only do it at the end of the practice, but you need to do it before to get the most out of the practice. So being here in the present, calm the thoughts, and that's what we do with breath, the 9-cycle breathing, to bring our attention to the present moment. Once we've done that, then we have to look at our motivation. It's very important to generate motivation because it's that which gives direction to our actions. Usually we're in kind of an autopilot and we kind of forget why we're doing it. So we need to generate the correct motivation. And here we have 2 parts. So that means developing love towards ourselves and love towards others. That's the motivation, which is the basis of doing, of self-healing. Love towards ourselves and love towards others. But to generate this, we induce ourselves into this with recitation and visualizations. So the first is developing love for ourselves with the taking refuge. And I said I wouldn't get into details, so I won't. So I'm going to restrain myself. But the first part is where we really here should actually do meditation on the 4 Noble Truths. What do I want to avoid in this life? Do I just want to avoid superficial suffering, or do I want to get out of the all-pervading suffering? Yeah, if you don't do the sutra, the Tantra is just pe 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 hum hum, they say in Tibetan. So if we don't have a basis, the rest is just very superficial. So when we've listened and understood the 4 Noble Truths, at the beginning there's the part, realizing all-pervading suffering and impermanence as sufferings and as suffering. So if we don't see the all-pervasive nature of suffering, then we've missed a big part. Some of you will get that, some of you won't. What is it that I want to avoid at all costs? Do I just want to get out of physical and mental suffering, or do I want to get out of the cycle of dissatisfaction, the karmic forces which are generated? In other words, recognizing samsara. Here what do I want to do? So I see, once I've seen samsara for what it is, I say, I want to get out of this. And can I get out of it? Yes. So I take refuge in the path. I want to follow this path. I entrust myself to this process, developing my qualities to get out of the cycle of suffering. And here I ask the Guru's help, Buddha's help, Sangha's help. So when we take refuge, normally people just do it automatically. And maybe you even recite it very well, and you kind of look upwards as if you're really feeling something. But it doesn't mean we're doing it with intention and motivation. And here I want to add something. It's not a criticism, but it's something I would like to share with you. There's something that's called the accumulation of preliminary practices in Tibetan, which means going beyond. So this includes the recitation of repeating many, many times. So obviously, the more I recite something and repeat something, to get. So if you do 100,000 times, so if you do so we normally talk about 100,000 times of repeating the taking refuge, but it doesn't mean that when I've done 100,001 times, it's not a question of quantity, but it's more of a question if I've internalized it and if I've developed this enormous desire to get out of suffering and suffering. Pabanka Rinpoche described it as, it's as if we imagine if we have a very strong object of aversion, a situation or a person, whom just thinking about it, we feel rancor and anger, resentment. That object, do we know it? Yes or no already? But what happens if I start talking to you about the person of the aversion? If I talk to you about the things that you know, are we impervious to this, or the more I talk about it, or more do I feel it? Let's talk about an object of desire. If I describe it and polar it, talk about this object of desire, the desire increases. So if I say in Buddha Dharma and Sangha, take refuge in enlightenment, we should have that feeling of entrusting ourselves, of asking for help, the desire, burning desire to get out of samsara, not just something to recite. You know, like a parrot. This is the only context in which I saw it, where I saw sarcasm applied in the monasteries when something is done badly. So let's say somebody had to clean a room, and he does it doesn't do it very well, very superficially, and with the lack of presence, they say, the term that they use is, instead of saying you did it badly, say you did it for the benefit of all sentient beings. Why? Very sarcastically. Because when we say in Buddha Dharma Sangha, I take refuge in enlightenment, etc. Because we say at the end, for the benefit of all sentient beings. If you do it automatically, it has no effect on the mind at all. It's automatic. It's not felt, heartfelt. Therefore, to say something without mental presence, so they say sarcastically, it's done for the benefit of all sentient beings. It would be better if it were the opposite. What happens is that the first part is to familiarize ourselves with these inner states, reciting, visualizing lights, rev lights that goes from Guru Buddha to our respective chakras, etc., etc. And actually the most simplest visualization is actually the most complex because it has to get right into us. I just wanted to say, to complete the preliminaries, it's not a question of quantity, but it's a question of how much familiarity has been generated and how much you really feel it inside. Do you get it? Is that it? The second part of generating bodhicitta, the phase in which I recite this with the purpose of generating altruism, of generating love and compassion towards the others, with a deep commitment to develop myself for the benefit of others. This is the second part, the second fundamental part of the preliminaries. And these two things are just an enormous thing. It's the basis for all the rest. So it's like the mandala. It's that which permits us to get into the mandala. If you don't get through this, you don't get into it. You just see it from a distance. So the first parts, using this analogy to get into the mandalas, is to develop love towards ourselves and love towards others. So the first part of it, empowerment. So we do exactly this, which gives us the vehicle that permits us to enter into this. These days I want to do a meditation in the morning directed more to the preliminary practice, and then this visualization, and then slowly each part. So I just want to emphasize that preliminary practices are often overlooked, but they are really important and fundamental. One of our lineage masters, Papanka, who's the guru of Trijang Rinpoche, the guru of Guru Lama Gangchen, when he gave teachings of Lamrim, it was when he developed himself a deep realization, it was only when you develop this deep understanding he meditated more or less for 1.5 years in order to develop this himself. We should remember that the preliminaries are often underrated. So the recitation is not enough in itself. So preliminaries are composed of generating correct motivation, accumulating merits, receiving blessings without getting into details. Let's take refuge and let's generate altruism and bodhicitta, and then we disconnect from the outer world where we find ourselves now. We're in a pure world, and we make an effort to connect with that world and to the howling beings, and to connect with them. So firstly, internalizing the state with which we want to internally, the state I'd like to achieve, or externally with something that represents the state that we want to enter. Many times, the relationship between and the wisdom beings. And there's a photo of Trijang Rinpoche. Who do we connect with when we see the photo of Trijang Rinpoche? With Trijang Rinpoche. So let's, for example, if I just say name, if I give a name like Lama Caroline, Who do we connect with? With the person. So the being with which we connect is called the wisdom being, and that which helps us, the initial thing, is the commitment being. Is that the person? Our being in our essence, is in our completeness, is the wisdom being. That which is like a bridge, a point of departure, is a commitment being. So it could be a name, it could be an image, it could be a voice. There are many levels which serve as a bridge to get to the wisdom being. So the preliminary beings, we create this bridge with the holy beings, with lineage masters, to ask for their blessings. And part of that is described as a blessing. It's described as a condition for which the rest is possible. Once we've received the blessings, we have the part of effective practice, state divided into generation completion stage. What's important is to, first of all, when we look at the practice of self-healing, at least this is what I do, I kind of look at it on a macro level, and then I divide on a macro level, and then I slowly move in onto a micro level. So on a macro level, we have preliminary level practices, creating calm, generating motivation, inviting the field of merit to us, accumulate merits, the seven-limb prayer. And these are the preliminary practices. After that, there's the state of generation, made of 3 transformations, and the generation. And then there's the completion stage, which is made up of 4 empowerments, and then there's the conclusions. These are the macro level divisions. And then we have very, very many different levels of comprehension. It's a bit like, it's like a journey that we undertake, an inner experience, through the power of concentration, imagination, visualization. And we start from where we are, the point we are there, and we get to the state of consciousness. We then a growing state, in a state of peace, love and compassion. We generate the state, and then we take it from a gross level and we take it to a subtle, very subtle level. And then we come back to where we are. Therefore, I don't want to go on too much about this. And this is really to understand why we do this practice. And the first reason is it's not enough to understand. We need to familiarize ourselves with this. And self-healing is a very valid technique composed of recitation, visualization, symbols, colors, gestures, so many aspects which have been practiced for so many generations, and it's worked well for other generations, so it's kind of been certified. And then which help us to get from understanding to a level of realization. So from understanding, to realization. In the middle there's an ocean, as we say in Italian. So we have to, that's what we're focused on, getting from one shore to the other shore, from gross to very subtle. I'm very happy that I do the part of the morning, and then Lama Caroline does the afternoon practice. So she's going to explain the 5 Dhyana Buddhas. Let's try to follow the sessions, to dedicate, to get ourselves to the practice. So it's important not only when we're together here in the temple, but also outside, when we go to eat, when we're at home, and so on. This is important. The attitude with which we leave the Gompa has an enormous effect on how we are outside and helps us to familiarize ourselves before the next session. And this is important to have this understanding. Let's make our dedications.
Losan tempe drume sasumgi drove munsel takto ne gyurchi nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshi ninsen takto delekpe kuncho sumki chingi lobo kuncho sumki ngodrubutsol kuncho sumki trashishu. All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possano i 3 gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possano aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the 3 jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with many signs of auspiciousness. Oma huntumba lame sangye rinpoche, kyopa lame tamcho rinpoche, trimba lame gendu rinpoche, kyamne kuncho sumla chopa. Buon appetit.
Enjoy your lunch. Thank you.